Welcome to our second lesson on genetics. In our first lesson, we looked at some basic terms that are used in genetics. In this particular lesson, we are going to look at the earliest works that have led to the great advancements that we see in genetics today. But before we get into what we have for this particular lesson, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you always have our videos whenever they are released. This lesson will focus on Mendel's experiment as well as the laws of inheritance. So for the objectives, I am saying that at the end of this lesson, the student would know the early experiments that led to our advanced genetics today. And as well, the student would be able to apply Mendel's laws of inheritance. Our world today cannot boast of the advancements in genetics without mentioning the name of this man, Gregor Mendel. Well, Gregor Mendel is referred to as the father of genetics because his early works are what have led to the great advancements that we are seeing in genetics today. He was an Austrian, and he was a scientist, a teacher, and as well an abbot. An abbot means that he was a Catholic who was also the head of a monastery. It is true that Mendel has made significant impact on the lives of humans by bringing the concept of genetics to light. Yes, of course, because we know that genetics has brought great improvements in agriculture, medicine, and many other fields that we can talk about. Well, we know that in agriculture, through genetic engineering, we now have been able to produce crops that are disease resistant, and as well, there is increase in crop yield, as well as enhanced nutrient composition. Well, among the farmers, knowledge of genetics has been used to improve artificial selection of animals and plants as well. In medicine, however, knowledge of genetics has led to the artificial production of insulin to treat diabetes. And now, some genetic disorders are even diagnosed very early in the developmental stages of the fetus, so that possible corrections can be made. And as well, genetics has even paved way for studies into possible remedies for cancers. So looking at these, we can tell how far genetics is impacting human lives positively. And in all of these, would give credit to Mendel. Genetics has become a very great field now, but it started with a simple experiment by Mendel using the pea plant. This is the pea plant. Mendel considered 7 traits of the pea plant and tried to experiment using those 7 traits. So he considered the color of the flower, whether it is purple or white, the position of the flower, whether it is terminal or axial, the color of seed, whether it's yellow or green, the shape of seed, whether round or wrinkled, the color of pod, whether yellow or green, shape of pod, whether inflated or constricted, and finally height of plant, whether tall or short. But I have not arranged them in any particular order. Mendel wanted to find out if there was a factor that always made some of the plants have purple flowers and the others having white flowers. He also wanted to find out if there was something responsible for why some of the seeds had yellow color and others had green color. So he experimented with all these 7 traits to see what differences or similarities may be observed among them, and possibly what factor would be controlling why they keep on having these characteristics. I am going to consider only 2 of these traits and use them to explain Mendel's experiment with the pea plants. I'll consider the color of flower, and I'll consider as well the shape of seed. So let's look at the experiments. I will start with Mendel's experiment on the color of the flowers. Note that Mendel focused on pure breeds of a trait, because that is what was probably going to lead him to a very good conclusion. Pure breeds would mean that, considering the color of the flower per se, Mendel wanted to make sure that if he is choosing a purple colored flower, that particular flower must come from individuals that only produce purple flowers. And if he is choosing white colored flowers, he must make sure that those flowers only come from individuals that produce white flowers. So pure purple flowered plants and pure white flowered plants were used. So that is what we are going to look at in this particular case. Now, when Mendel crossed the pure breeding purple flowered pea plants with the pure breeding white flowered pea plants, Mendel realized that all the offspring that were produced were purple flowered. So like this. Although the cross was between purple flowered pea and white flowered pea, but all the offspring appeared with purple flowers. This is the F1 generation, so in other words to say that this is the first generation from the first cross. So this made the whole thing interesting. Why would no white flowered pea ever appear in it? So Mendel wanted to be sure of what was going on. So the next stage was that Mendel then self-pollinated the F1 offspring. And when he self-pollinated them, Mendel made a different observation in this case. He realized that some of them had purple flowers while others had white flowers. But it was in a certain ratio, and the ratio was 3:1. So like this. So assuming 12 offspring were produced from it, Mendel realized that 9 of them had purple flowers and 3 of them had white flowers. Assuming they were 24, Mendel realized that 18 of them had purple flowers and 6 of them had white flowers. This drew Mendel's attention to something. So he had to experiment with other traits to see if he is going to make observations similar to what he had seen in the case of the color of flower. So now let us look at another trait that Mendel considered. The shape of seeds. Mendel also experimented on the shape of seeds to see which kind of observation he was going to make, whether it would be similar to the other traits that he had considered before, or it would show a different pattern. So in this case too, Mendel considered pure breeding round seeds and pure breeding wrinkled seeds. Now, when Mendel crossed the pure breeding round seeds with the pure breeding wrinkled seeds, Mendel realized that all the offspring that were produced had round seeds. So that seems to follow the same pattern as the color of the flower. So Mendel again self-pollinated the F1 to see what kind of observation would be made among them. He self-pollinated the round seeds, and this was his observation. He realized that in the second generation, that is in the F2, it followed the same pattern of a ratio of 3 round:1 wrinkled. So this made Mendel sure of what he was observing, because in the case of the color of flower, he realized that in the F1, the white flower was missing, but in the F2, it reappeared. In the same way, when he considered the shape of the seeds, he realized that in the F1, the wrinkled seeds were missing, but in the F2, they reappeared. Mendel therefore coined the terms recessive and dominant to describe the traits. Remember that we have talked about recessive and dominant in our first lesson. He said that recessive traits are not expressed in the presence of the dominant. And of course, that was from his observations in the experiment. He realized that the white flower was not observed in the F1. So that means the purple hid it. And so that would make the white recessive, but the purple being dominant. And of course, in the other experiment of the seed shape, he also realized that the wrinkled seed did not show outwardly in the F1, but it showed in the F2. So it means that the factor which we now call genes responsible for the wrinkled seed was hidden in the F1, and so it makes the wrinkled seed trait the recessive one, whereas the round seed trait would be the dominant. After Mendel has experimented with the 7 traits, he came up with his principles, what we will now refer to as the laws of inheritance. So next we are going to look at which laws Mendel came up with. The first of the laws is the law of dominance, which we just looked at. This states that in a heterozygote, one trait will conceal the presence of another trait for the same characteristic. In simple terms, the dominant will conceal or hide the recessive. That is the meaning of this particular law of dominance. So like the case of the round seed, which was crossed with the wrinkled seed, where we realized that in the F1, they were all round seeds. So in this case, the round seed trait, which is the dominant, concealed the wrinkled seed trait, which is the recessive, and that is why in the F1, they were all round seeds. Let us now look at another law of inheritance. It is the law of segregation. This states that a diploid organism passes a randomly selected allele for a trait to its offspring, such that the offspring receives one allele from each parent. And what does this mean? Segregation could, in other words, be simply put as separation. So it is in relation to the separation of the chromosomes at the time when the gametes are forming. In our previous lesson, I said that humans have 46 chromosomes that appear in 23 pairs, but when the gametes are forming, only one of each pair would be chosen. So, for example, in the formation of the sperm cell, there would be 23 chromosomes and not 46 because only one of each pair would be chosen. The same thing happens in the formation of the egg cell, where only one of the chromosome pairs would be chosen, so that in the end, when fusion occurs, it would bring the number back to the 46. This happens in all diploid organisms, and a similar thing was observed in the experiments that were done by Mendel. In the example of the color of flower, Mendel crossed purple-flowered pea plants with white-flowered pea plants and observed in the F1 that they were all purple-colored. It means that one chromosome that carries the purple color was inherited from the purple parent, and another chromosome was inherited from the white parent with a white allele. So the F1 had all organisms that have one chromosome with purple flower and one chromosome with white flower. So that is how they were. So like this. All the offspring had chromosomes of this nature, where one chromosome had purple flower gene on it and the other had white flower gene on it, although it's the same kind of gene, so different alleles in this case. And another also had this purple and then white. But they were all purple because the purple is dominant and the white is recessive. So they were all purple. But what Mendel was trying to say can be better illustrated with the self-pollination of the F1 to produce the F2. So the F1 offspring that would now serve as the parent for the F2. So when you consider one parent, within that particular parent, there is a purple allele and there is a white allele. And then the other parent too, there is a purple allele, there is a white allele. But Mendel was saying that since both chromosomes wouldn't be passed on to the F2 offspring, only one of these would be passed on to the F2 offspring. It is possible the choosing would be this one with this. And that is going to result in an organism that has two alleles for purple. Right. Let me use the same parents again, but let's look at another possible combination. It is possible that the offspring may have chosen the white allele here and combined with the purple allele here. And in that case, this is the kind of genotype that offspring would have. So one white allele, one purple allele. But remember, that particular offspring will still be purple flowered because purple is dominant over white. There is also the possibility that the offspring may choose white from one parent and a white from the other parent, and that is going to result in two white alleles. And in this case, that offspring would have white flowers. So that is what was observed in the F2 when the white flower appeared again. So Mendel based on this occurrence to explain that then it means in diploid organisms, the alleles are selected randomly. So any of the alleles can be chosen from any of the parents since the chromosomes are not transferred together. So it means the alleles are not passed on together. Let us now move to the third law. The law of independent assortment. It states that the alleles of two or more different genes get sorted into gametes independently of one another. I will explain this law using an example outside Mendel's experiments. Using Mendel's law of independent assortment to explain the inheritance of body color and eye color in an insect, which I'm saying in this case in a certain species of insect I'm not being particular about. But this is an inheritance that actually happens. In this case, it would mean that since the inheritance of body color gene is independent of the inheritance of eye color gene, an offspring could have any of these genes and be combined with any of these two genes. So that means an organism could have black gene for body color and purple color for the eye. The organism could also have black body color and then red eye color. Similarly, any of these two could be chosen. So a gray body gene could be paired with a purple eye color gene, and then a gray body gene could also as well be paired with a red eye gene. So like this. A black body gene could be paired with purple eye gene. Right. And then a black body gene could also be paired with red eye gene. Similarly, a gray body could also be paired with purple eye. And as well, a gray body could be paired with red eye. This is how Mendel's law of independent assortment would explain this particular situation. So it means any form of combination is possible because the genes are sorted into gametes independently. Right. But there is a situation that creates an exception to this law of Mendel. In this insect, the interesting thing is that the chromosome on which the black body color gene is found is the same chromosome on which the purple eye color gene is found. And similarly, the chromosome on which the gray body gene is found is the same chromosome on which the red eye color gene is also found. So that means whenever the black body color is passed on to the gamete, it goes together with the purple eye color gene. And whenever the gray body color gene is passed on to the gamete, it goes with the red eye color gene. So that creates an exception to this particular law of independent assortment, that any form of combination is possible, but not really the case all the time. Although in Mendel's experiment it worked, but in the new findings we have realized that it doesn't happen in all cases because of what we refer to as linkage. So that doesn't allow certain combinations in the formation of offspring. So like this, black always goes with purple and gray always goes with red. Alright, so this brings us to the end of our second lesson on genetics. So far, we have looked at Mendel being the father of genetics, and we came to look at Mendel's P experiments that have led to the great advancements that we see in genetics today. And we have also looked at Mendel's laws of inheritance, the law of dominance, the law of segregation, and the law of independent assortment, where I said there are some exceptions. Good. In our next lesson, we are going to look at inheritance, and we will start by looking at monohybrid crosses, because there are different forms of the crosses, so we'll look at monohybrid crosses in our next lesson. Okay, but before we end, I have these few simple questions for you that I would like you to try and submit your answers to the number that will be provided or the email address. So the first question is, state Mendel's laws of inheritance. Then use any of the 7 traits of Mendel's experiment to describe inheritance. And the third question is, scientific studies about inheritance was first done by. So you put your answer there. Right. Thank you for being part of this lesson. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you always have our videos whenever they are released.